The 10 toughest actors in Hollywood history. They didn't just play tough guys on screen, they were tough guys in real life. The kind of guys who could break your jaw with one punch and get the scene over with. The most powerful Hollywood stars are more than just actors when they play heroes, gladiators, and warriors. Many have lived lives as dramatic and dangerous as their on-screen characters. They are real men bringing real grit to the silver screen because they have lived it. Today, we're going beyond Hollywood hype to uncover the shocking truth about the 10 toughest actors in film history. Men who brought real courage, strength, and resilience to their roles. What makes number 4 on our list especially amazing is that studio. Executives went to great lengths to keep his background a secret, for fear that audiences wouldn't believe it was possible. But before we dive into the fascinating history of Hollywood today, I'd love to know where you're watching. Leave a comment below and let us know where you're watching. I read all comments and love connecting with classic film enthusiasts around the world. Let's start with perhaps the toughest actor in Hollywood history. A man whose real-life exploits would be hard to believe if they weren't documented in detail. Audie Murphy. When you think of Hollywood bad guys, you might picture John Wayne or Clint Eastwood. But the most badass man to ever grace the silver screen was a 56. Tall, baby-faced actor who looked so harmless that directors often had trouble casting him in action roles. Audie Murphy, however, was undoubtedly the most dangerous man in Hollywood history. Before he became an actor, Murphy was the most decorated American soldier of World War II. At just 19 years old, he single-handedly held off an entire German company for an hour in France, then led a successful counterattack despite being wounded and out of ammunition. For this incredible act of bravery, he was awarded the Medal of Honor, the highest military honor bestowed by the United States government. But that was just a small event in Murphy's extraordinary military career. He received every American combat award for valor during his service, along with 5 medals from France and Belgium. In total, Murphy received 28 military medals before his 21st birthday. His exploits included destroying multiple enemy tanks, single-handedly attacking machine gun nests on multiple occasions, and continuing to fight despite being wounded 3 times. Hollywood discovered Murphy when his heroic performances landed him on the cover of Life magazine. But directors initially struggled to cast him. Because he looked too young and innocent to be a real hero, Murphy's boyish looks were so deceptive that when he first arrived at a Hollywood studio for his audition, security guards initially didn't believe he was the war hero they expected. Ironically, Murphy, despite his unassuming appearance, is said to have been more lethal than any actor ever to appear on camera. Military historians estimate that Murphy personally killed between 240 and 300 enemy soldiers during his service, more than many entire military units. Perhaps most notable was Murphy's unflinching portrayal of himself in the autobiographical war film To Hell and Back. In one of Hollywood's most surreal moments, the real-life war hero recreated his own exploits on the battlefield, but had to tone down some of his real accomplishments because the producers were worried the audience would find the truth too far-fetched. Director Jesse Hibbs later revealed, "We had to omit some of Audie's real exploits because no one would believe them." Murphy suffered from severe post-traumatic stress disorder, slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow, and struggled with nightmares that often left him waking up in a cold sweat reaching for his weapon. His second wife, Wanda Hendricks, once said, "Audie had 2 completely different sides. In public, he was shy, soft-spoken, and gentle. But I saw him wake from nightmares and become someone I didn't recognize, a brutal killer whose instincts scared me." Despite his inner demons, Murphy maintained remarkable poise throughout his Hollywood career. Only once did his fighting instincts show in public when a businessman made threatening moves during a heated argument. According to witnesses, Murphy's reaction was so swift and menacing that he later said, "I suddenly realized I was looking into the eyes of someone who could kill me without hesitation. It was the most terrifying moment of my life." What makes Murphy's story particularly remarkable is that unlike many on our list, he never sought to be a tough guy on screen. In fact, he preferred comedic and romantic roles where he could escape his violent past. Yet behind his gentle exterior was a man who had been in real combat and personally taken down more enemies than any other professional actor in history. Charles Bronson. Before becoming one of cinema's most iconic tough guys, Charles Bronson lived a life of hardship that would have broken most men born. Charles Bukinski, he grew up in abject poverty, one of 15 children in a Pennsylvania coal mining family. At age 10, he went to work in the mines to support his family, spending his formative years hundreds of feet underground in the dark. When speaking of his childhood, Bronson rarely elaborated, but once said simply, "I suppose I'm attracted to these roles. Because of my background, I was raised in violent neighborhoods and saw killing firsthand. We lived with death, starvation, and misery." What many don't realize is that the signature Bronson appearance, the weathered face, the suspicious squint, the perpetual grimace, wasn't an act at all. These were the physical manifestations of a man who had spent his early years breathing coal dust in near darkness and fighting for survival in violent neighborhoods where showing weakness meant you wouldn't last long. But Bronson's real trial by fire came during World War II. As a B-29 aerial gunner in the Army Air Forces, he flew 25 combat missions over Japan and received a Purple Heart for wounds sustained in battle. Colleagues from his military days described him as unnervingly calm under fire and the kind of man you wanted next to you when things went bad. After the war, Bronson's path to stardom was anything but easy. He worked over 50 different jobs, including onion picker, short-order cook, and professional boxer while pursuing small acting roles, even after securing more regular acting work. Directors often cast him as thugs, convicts, and Native Americans, despite his Lithuanian heritage because of his naturally intimidating appearance. What separated Bronson from other tough guy actors was that while many performed their own stunts, Bronson performed his own fights, and he fought like someone who actually knew how violence worked. Film historian Eddie Muller noted, "When Bronson throws a punch on screen, it doesn't look choreographed. It looks like a man who has been in real fights and knows how to hurt someone efficiently." His co-stars often commented on his surprising physical strength. Despite standing only 5 feet 9 inches, Bronson maintained the powerful build of a former laborer and boxer, Jan Michael Vincent, who worked with him on The Mechanic Recalled. "During a scene where he was supposed to just grab my shirt, I could feel the incredible strength in his hands. This wasn't an actor pretending to be strong. This was genuine power developed through years of hard labor." Perhaps most telling about Bronson's authentic toughness was his response to death. Threats from the mafia after his portrayal of vigilante Paul Kersey in Death Wish. While the studio offered him bodyguards, Bronson reportedly declined, saying simply, unlike other stars who might have sought protection or publicity from such threats. Bronson's response demonstrated the quiet confidence of a man who had faced far worse dangers. Director Michael Winner, who worked with Bronson on numerous films, once said, "Charles doesn't act tough. He simply is tough. There's a substantial difference. Most actors who play tough guys are gentle souls when they play them. Bronson has a genuine toughness that comes from a life of real struggle and danger. You can't fake that authenticity." Lee Marvin. Lee Marvin didn't just play scary characters. He was exactly the kind of dangerous man he often portrayed on screen before becoming one of Hollywood's most famous tough guys. Marvin served as a Marine in World War II, where he participated in some of the bloodiest battles of the Pacific Theater. As a private in the 4th Marine Division, Marvin fought in the Battle of Saipan in 1944, where he was severely wounded by machine gun fire, severing his sciatic nerve. The injury left him hospitalized for a year and left him with a permanent limp, which he hid throughout his acting career. For his service and injuries, Marvin was awarded the Purple Heart, although he rarely spoke in detail about his military experiences. When talking about his time in combat, Marvin was brutally honest about the horrors. Unlike some veteran actors, who romanticize their service, he once said, "I was a Marine sniper in the Pacific. I got shot in the butt and sent home." It's true. Anyone who says they like fighting is either a liar or a fool. It's this honesty that makes Marvin uniquely qualified to portray violence on screen. Director John Borman, who worked with Marvin on Point Blank, commented that Lee understood violence in a way that most actors never do. When he plays a violent man, there is a truth to it that comes from seeing people kill and be killed. He knows what real violence is like, fast, brutal, and without the drama you see in movies. Marvin's military background gave him a perspective on-screen violence that other actors didn't have. In films like The Dirty Dozen and The Killers, his portrayals of violent men were chillingly real, precisely because he didn't appear dangerous. He drew on real-life experiences from the battlefield. His fellow actors often felt intimidated by Marvin, both on and off screen. James Coburn, known for his powerful roles, once said, "When Lee walked onto the set, the atmosphere changed immediately. Everyone stood up a little straighter. There was something truly dangerous about him that you couldn't quite put into words, but you could definitely feel. Perhaps the best demonstration of Marvin's true toughness was his infamous bar fight with a crew of loggers while he was filming in Oregon, according to multiple witnesses. Marvin, who was in his 40s at the time, held his own against several much younger men until the state police arrived. The next day, he showed up on time, covered in bruises, but refused medical attention or any schedule adjustments. What made Marvin particularly appealing was his combination of physical prowess and intellectual depth. Despite his reputation as an alcoholic and a fighter, he was well-read and very conscientious about his craft. Director Samuel Fuller, who worked with Marvin on The Big Red One, said Lee had seen the worst of humanity in war, and that gave him a philosophical perspective. You wouldn't expect he could be discussing Ernest Hemingway one minute and demonstrating the most effective way to neutralize an opponent the next. In an era where many action stars simply played tough guys, Lee Marvin brought the real thing to the screen. A combat-hardened Marine, he had faced death and brought that experience to every role he played. As film critic Roger Ebert once remarked, when Lee Marvin threatened someone in a movie, you believed it, because Lee Marvin could actually carry out that threat. Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen was more than just the king of Hollywood cool. He was a true daredevil whose off-screen adventures far outstripped his on-screen personas. Unlike some tough actors who relied on elaborate publicity, stunts, and body doubles, McQueen performed his own stunts whenever possible and lived a life of real risk and adventure. McQueen's path to toughness began early. After a troubled childhood filled with neglect and abuse, he ran away from home at age 14 and eventually joined the United States Marine Corps in 1947. His military service was not smooth. He was demoted 7 times for insubordination, and once spent 41 days in jail for extending his weekend leave into a 2-week absence. Despite his rebellious nature, however, McQueen eventually trained and even saved the lives of 5 fellow Marines during an Arctic exercise when their tank broke through the ice and crashed into the sea. After his honorable discharge, McQueen worked a variety of jobs from logger to oil rigger to street vendor before finding his path in acting. But unlike many other actors who, once successful, leave their adventurous past behind, McQueen continued to push his physical limits throughout his career. His passion for racing was more than just a hobby. It was an obsession that often threatened his life and career. McQueen competed professionally in both motor and car racing, often using a stage name to avoid being banned by film studios. During the filming of The Great Escape, McQueen performed all of his own motorcycle stunts except for the famous fence jump, which the studio's insurance company wouldn't allow. What many people don't realize is that McQueen's racing wasn't just for show. He competed against professional racers and often placed high. In the 1970 0-12 Hours of Sebring, one of the world's most prestigious endurance races, McQueen and co-driver Peter Revson finished second. Overall, despite McQueen racing with a leg in a cast from a motorcycle accident weeks earlier, his longtime stunt double and friend. Bud Ekins once said Steve didn't play the role of a racer or a tough guy. He was both. I have known professional racers who did not have Steve's skill or courage on a bike or in a car. McQueen's willingness to put himself in real danger extended to his filmmaking. During the filming of The Sand Pebbles, he insisted on doing a dangerous river scene himself, nearly drowning when he was caught in an unexpectedly strong current. In The Towering Inferno, he performed stunts with live fire that even experienced stuntmen considered extremely dangerous. Director John Sturges, who worked with McQueen on The Great Escape and The Magnificent Seven, commented that the problem with Steve was not getting him to do the stunts, but trying to stop him from doing the truly life-threatening ones. He was completely fearless, which made him both amazing to work with and terrifying to keep safe. Perhaps the most telling aspect of McQueen's true toughness was his reaction to finding out he was on Charles Manson's hit list. When informed by police that the Manson family planned to target him, along with other celebrities including Frank Sinatra, McQueen began carrying a loaded Magnum revolver everywhere he went. Unlike other stars who hired large security teams, McQueen's approach was simple. He would protect himself. Racing champion Mario Andretti, who competed with McQueen, once remarked that Hollywood was full of actors who played tough guys, but Steve was the real deal. Most of them pretended to be. This man has more track presence than any professional racer I know. Kirk Douglas. Before becoming one of Hollywood's biggest stars, Kirk Douglas, born Esser Danielovich, rose from abject poverty through sheer willpower. The son of Jewish immigrants, Douglas grew up in a family so poor that his family sometimes went hungry. He earned his first pennies selling snacks to factory workers, developing the drive and determination that would later lead him to Hollywood. But Douglas didn't just fight poverty. He turned his childhood poverty into a full-fledged wrestler. Before pursuing an acting career, Douglas wrestled professionally and earned a scholarship to St. Lawrence University for his wrestling talent. This was not theatrical wrestling, but a formal college competition that required real strength, skill, and endurance. Douglas' real challenge came during World War II when he served as a communications officer on a U.S. Navy submarine chaser. Military service in anti-submarine warfare was extremely dangerous, with the constant threat of enemy attack and the psychological pressure of operating in the confined space of a small warship. Douglas was injured during his service and was discharged for health reasons in 1944. What set Douglas apart from other tough actors was his combination of physical strength and mental toughness. Director Stanley Kubrick, who had a heated argument with Douglas during the filming of Spartacus later, admitted that Kirk was an absolute force of nature. When he decided something was going to happen, it happened, period. His physical prowess was impressive, but it was his mental fortitude that was truly terrifying. Douglas' reputation for tenacity was evident on set. For Spartacus, he trained extensively with former gladiators and wrestlers to ensure the fight scenes looked authentic. During one scene, Douglas insisted on a dangerous fall that the stunt coordinator had advised against, resulting in injuries that would have forced most other actors to quit, but Douglas returned to the set after just 2 days. His co-stars frequently commented on both his physical prowess and his intimidating appearance. Burt Lancaster, famous for his background as a circus acrobat, said of Douglas that Kirk approached him as a physical confrontation. He didn't just act a scene, he attacked it. Perhaps the most telling example of Douglas's true resilience was his recovery from a serious helicopter crash in 1991 that killed 2 others and left him with a serious back injury. Despite being in his 70s, Douglas endured a long and painful rehabilitation process, eventually regaining the ability to walk. Then, after suffering a serious stroke in 1996 that left him with severe speech impairment, Douglas underwent years of therapy and published a book about his recovery, a testament to his unwavering determination. Director Howard Hawks, who has worked with many of Hollywood's most powerful figures, once remarked that this reflected his straightforward approach to confrontation, an approach developed through real struggle rather than Hollywood performance. Robert Mitchum. Robert Mitchum's legendary composure on screen wasn't an act. It was the natural, demeanor of a man who experienced real hardship, violence, and even prison before becoming a Hollywood star. Unlike many actors who played tough guys, Mitchum lived a life that made his on-screen roles seem trivial. Orphaned at a young age, Mitchum spent his childhood as a Depression-era vagrant traveling across America and taking any job he could find. During this time, he worked as a ditch digger, a coal miner, and a professional boxer, developing both the muscular physique and the world-weary attitude that would later define his on-screen persona. His boxing career was brief but remarkable. Fighting under the name Jimmy Mitchum, he entered local fights as a teenager, developing a genuine fighting skill and the trademark broken nose that would later become part of his rugged on-screen appearance. Unlike some actors who claim to have a boxing background, Mitchum actually punched and threw punches. Perhaps most important in shaping Mitchum's true character was his time in a Georgia gang after being arrested for vagrancy as a teenager. This brief but harsh experience gave him first-hand insight into a harsh world that most Hollywood heroes only pretend to understand. What sets Mitchum apart from other on-screen heroes is his lack of glamour. Director Edward Dmytryk, who worked with him on Crossfire, once remarked, "Bob never had to prove how tough he was just tough and everyone around him sensed it." Mitchum had a real undisguised danger. His co-stars often commented on Mitchum's incredible physical strength despite his laid-back appearance. During filming of Night of the Hunter director, Charles Laughton was amazed by Mitchum's strength as he easily carried actress Shelley Winters on his back through several physically demanding scenes without showing any signs of strain. Mitchum's true flexibility was also sometimes evident in real life. When he was arrested for marijuana possession in 1948, a major scandal at the time, Mitchum served 60 days in jail with the calm that characterized his on-screen roles. Rather than being destroyed by a controversy that could have ended many a career, Mitchum emerged from the experience, with his reputation for unflinching toughness cemented. Perhaps most telling of Mitchum's genuine nature are his candid assessments of acting. Unlike many other stars who speak reverently about their craft, Mitchum once said, director Joseph von Sternberg, known for his demanding perfectionism, once said of Mitchum. When asked about his seemingly effortless portrayals of tough guys, Mitchum offered this insightful comment. Anthony Quinn. Anthony Quinn's powerful on-screen presence wasn't born from acting classes. It was forged from a childhood of extreme poverty and manual labor, which gave him both the physique and tough exterior of a truly tough man, born in Chihuahua, Mexico during the Mexican Revolution. Quinn's earliest memories include soldiers' gunfire and his family's desperate escape from the violence. After immigrating to the United States, the Quinn family settled in the poorest neighborhoods of Los Angeles, where Anthony began working at the age of 10. Unlike many actors who developed their physiques in the gym, Quinn built his muscular physique through years of hard work working as a kitchen helper, boxer, and various construction jobs before stepping foot on film sets. His boxing career, while brief, was remarkable. Fighting professionally as a teenager to support his family, Quinn not only developed his fighting skills but also honed his signature broken nose, which is part of his rugged on-screen appearance. It wasn't a gimmick or a hobby. It was an economic necessity for a young immigrant trying to survive. Quinn's physical strength was legendary on set. During the filming of Zorba the Greek, the famous beach scene required Quinn to carry logs that would normally have taken 2 people instead of using camera tricks or stunts. Quinn simply performed the feats of strength as written, impressing even the local Greek laborers who served as extras in the film. Director Elia Kazan, who worked with Quinn on Viva Zapata, once commented, "Perhaps the most telling aspect of Quinn's true toughness is the way he handles stunts and physically demanding scenes." Even in his 50s and 60s, Quinn insisted on doing physically demanding scenes himself, often to the dismay of directors and insurance companies. During the filming of The Guns of Navarone at the age of 46, Quinn performed a dangerous cliff-climbing scene that the stunt coordinator had suggested be done with a stunt double. What makes Quinn unique among Hollywood's tough guys is that he has absolutely no concern for maintaining a masculine image. unlike many other actors, who cultivate a strong image both on and off screen. Quinn is comfortable showing vulnerability and emotion, his confidence in his masculinity. His ability to cry on screen without fear of being seen as weak comes from a man who doesn't need to prove his toughness to himself. Co-star Sophia Loren, who has worked with Quinn on several films, once said, "Anthony has the body of a warrior and the soul of a poet. He can lift you up with one hand and then discuss art with a sensitivity that surprises people who are only familiar with his tough roles. That combination makes him truly captivating, both on screen and off." In his autobiography, Quinn shared this perspective on how he portrayed the character. John Wayne. John Wayne's tough guy, heroic image was not just a product of Hollywood, but also stemmed from his real physical strength and hardships. Before he began his acting career, before becoming Duke, Wayne Marion Morrison grew up in the sparse and harsh environment of early 20th century California and Iowa, where manual labor was the norm. Standing 6'3", tall and muscular, Wayne distinguished himself from a young age not as an actor, but as a football player earning an athletic scholarship to the University of Southern California. His strength and athleticism were so impressive that in his early days in Hollywood, he worked as a prop and stuntman before landing leading roles, often moving scenes that required 2 or 3 people to handle. What many people don't realize about Wayne is that he actually performed many of his own stunts well into middle age, taking physical risks that are unthinkable for stars of his caliber today. During the filming of The Alamo, Wayne insisted on doing a dangerous horsefall scene that resulted in broken ribs. Instead of taking a break to recover, he simply bandaged his ribs and continued directing and starring in films. Director John Ford, who worked with Wayne on many classic films, once said, "Duke's endurance is not acting. I've seen him work 14 hours a day in the desert heat, sending half the crew to the hospital with heat exhaustion, then get up the next day and go back to work without complaint." He was made of something different than most men. Wayne's physical stamina was perhaps best demonstrated during the filming of 1956's The Pole. Conqueror filming took place in Snow Canyon, Utah, downwind from the Nevada nuclear test sites, exposing the cast and crew to radioactive fallout. Of the 220 people involved in the film, 91 developed cancer in the following decades, including Wayne, who eventually died of stomach cancer in 1979. Yet, despite health problems possibly related to radiation exposure, Wayne continued to take on physically demanding roles for decades, his personal strength matched by an incredible pain tolerance. During the filming of The Greatest Story Ever Told in 1965, Wayne tore a shoulder ligament during a stunt, but refused to stop filming co-star Max Vaughn. Sito later recalled, "I saw John get hurt pretty badly, but he just bandaged it up during lunchtime and came back to finish the scene. There was no way he would stop. It just wasn't in his nature." Perhaps the most telling aspect of Wayne's true resilience was his battle with cancer, after having a lung and several ribs removed due to cancer in 1964. Wayne returned to performing his own stunts on The Sons of Katie Elder just months later, a decision that shocked doctors and his co-stars. Director Henry Hathaway said that after his surgery, "I tried to convince Duke to use a stunt double for rough shots. He just looked at me and said, either I do the stunt myself or you hire someone else." That's where the conversation ended. Although Wayne's political views in real life have been controversial over time, even his harshest critics have acknowledged his courage and resilience. Actor Kirk Douglas, who worked with Wayne despite political differences, once remarked, "You may not agree with his views, but don't doubt his resilience. I've seen him survive conditions that would have sent most men to the hospital." Regardless, John Wayne was physically strong enough to match the characters he played. James Cagney. Don't let his petite 51 frame fool you. James Cagney was one of the toughest men to ever grace Hollywood long before he became famous for his gangster roles and tough guys. Cagney honed his fighting skills through the harsh living conditions of his New York neighborhood. Growing up on Manhattan's Lower East Side, Cagney learned boxing not as a sport, but as a survival skill. The streets where he grew up were ruled by Gangs and his small stature meant Cagney had to be stronger and faster than his opponents. He became a skilled amateur boxer, developing the quick footwork and lightning-fast hands that would become part of his signature on-screen style. What most audiences don't realize when watching Cagney's famously realistic fight scenes is that they are watching a man who had been in dozens of real street fights and knew what real-world violence was like. Unlike the lengthy stage brawls that characterize many Hollywood films, Cagney's fights were quick, brutal, and effective, just like real street fights. Director Raoul Walsh, who worked with Cagney on several films, including White Heat, once remarked Jimmy knew how to throw a punch better than any actor I ever worked with because he had thrown so many real punches in his time. When he hits someone in a scene, you believe it because there's real technique behind it. Cagney's physical abilities didn't stop with fighting. He was a talented dancer before becoming an actor with incredible coordination and agility, allowing him to perform his own stunts throughout his later career. His dance background gave him a unique ability to move gracefully and powerfully, a combination that made his violent scenes particularly convincing. His co-stars often had to go through hardships to discover Cagney's incredible strength. During the filming of The Public Enemy, actress Mae Clarke was not warned that Cagney would actually shove a grapefruit in her face instead of pretending, resulting in genuine shock and minor injury. This was not the only time Cagney's honesty surprised his co-stars. He was known for his unscripted stage punches. Perhaps the most telling aspect of Cagney's genuine toughness was his reputation off stage. Despite his reputation for playing criminals, Cagney was known in Hollywood as someone who was hard to mess with. Bob Hope once remarked Jimmy was the kind of guy that if you tried to do something weird to him, he would knock you down on the spot, then pick you up and dust you off. Cagney himself rarely spoke about his fighting abilities, but when asked in a 1973 interview, he offered this insightful observation: "Know how to handle myself. Always have. When you get to my age and grow up. Like I did, you either learn to use your fists or get used to lying on the ground. I prefer standing." Before he became famous for his epic film roles and later his political activism, Charlton Heston established himself as a true tough guy through his military service and commitment to performing his own near-death stunts. Heston's service in World War II was not the kind of publicity some actors would prefer. He served as an air gunner in the Army Air Corps. Though typically modest about his career, Heston occasionally acknowledged the real danger once, saying, "When you're in a B-25 at 15,000 feet and people are shooting at you, you tend to have a wonderful concentration of mind." On the set of The 10 Commandments, Heston worked in the Sinai Desert in harsh conditions that sent several crew members to the hospital for heat exhaustion and dehydration. The physical demands Heston placed on himself are legendary in Hollywood. For Ben-Hur, he spent months learning to drive a chariot, suffering numerous injuries in the process. Rather than using stuntmen for the famous chariot race Heston performed most of his own stunts, including the moment he nearly got thrown from his chariot while jumping. Director William Wyler, famously short on praise, remarked of Heston in Ben-Hur that Chuck had extraordinary courage. Most stars of his caliber would have required a stunt double because of what he had been through. Perhaps most impressive was Heston's performance as Michelangelo in The Agony and the Ecstasy. To portray the artist who painted the Sistine Chapel ceiling, Heston spent hours each day raising his arms above his head, resulting in painful muscle spasms and infections that required medical attention. When offered extra padding and a more comfortable position between takes, Heston refused. Believing that genuine discomfort would enhance the performance, his co-stars frequently commented on both his physical stamina and his determination. Sophia Loren, who worked with Heston on El Cid, once remarked that Charlton could spend a whole day in a 70-pound suit of armor in the Spanish summer, heat when most actors could only endure an hour. He never complained, never asked for special treatment. There was something almost inhuman about his endurance. Not only was Heston physically strong, he also displayed incredible moral courage throughout his career, standing firm in his beliefs despite potential career repercussions. Whether marching with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the 1960s or fighting for gun rights in his later years, Heston always showed a willingness to stand up for unpopular positions and face criticism head-on. According to director Franklin J. Schaffner, who worked with Heston on Planet of the Apes, many actors have played heroes, but Chuck has that rare quality of being the embodiment of true heroism. He exudes genuine nobility and courage that cannot be faked. When he portrays a character facing seemingly impossible odds, you believe it because Heston himself possesses those qualities.